Creationists misrepresent science in many different ways and sometimes even ask questions, trying to mislead or discourage members of the general public, largely ignorant of modern science. Out of all the many different and often nonsensical questions asked by creationists, there are two that are not only the most common, but mostly also asked one after the other. The first of them is the well-known "where did everything come from?", which is usually or succeeded by a question that seems to be Mr. Kent Hovind's hobby horse idea, specifically regarding the origins of the universe and life. The famous, excuse me, were you there? Of course, none of us were there during the expansion of space-time, and none of us were there when abiogenesis kicked in and evolution then followed for the first time, and none of us were there when our distant ancestors climbed down from the trees to conquer the world. So, how do we know all this happened, and when? The answer is easy. If we weren't there, we have to work it out through evidence and logical deduction. But in order to prove my point, I don't have to go all the way back to the beginning of the universe or the formation of our planet. All I have to do is take a step out of my house. Take a look at these three crosses. They're found all around Europe and Germany, but mostly in the fields and rural areas, like the one in the middle. So, here's the question. What are the ones on the far left and the far right doing in the middle of a town? The cross on the far right even has a date that goes with it. According to the inscription, this cross was erected in 1765, and as one might guess, neither you, nor I, nor most of the buildings in the picture were around back then. So, how can we best work out the answer as to why the ones to the far left and right are in the middle of a town, and not on a rural pathway? In this case, finding the answer requires the extraordinary task of opening a history book concerning this place. And what do you know? Here is an old photograph of this place taken in 1896. As we can clearly see, about 100 years ago, much of what is now urban ground used to be arable farmland. The place where the 1765 cross stands is marked in red. The place where the other urban cross stands is not in the picture, though. The analogy between environmental development and residential development is, if I may say so, a very good one. Just like we can work out how and why animals died and lived millions of years ago, and just like we can work out how the continents used to be arranged, so too can we figure out how places used to look like and what life was back in the old days, by simply doing some research and looking at the evidence. If we weren't there, we have to work it out some way, somehow. For instance, we can ask ourselves what this place looked like in the past. Or this place. Or this place. Again, finding the answer to this question requires the Herculean uber task of doing some research. For instance, this is what the first picture, the main street, looked like in the 1920s. Regarding this picture, it was hard to figure out exactly when it was taken, but judging by the dresses of the ladies on the right, and according to what I know about this place, it's likely that this picture of the old guard tower was taken between the 1920s and 1950s. And finally we have this picture. Can you guess what this place looked like in the past? Just pause the video for a while and take a closer look. Figured it out? That's right! This is what the area in the picture you used earlier on looks like today. And as you've noticed, I played a little trick. As anyone with an IQ number that exceeds his or her body temperature can readily guess, the black and white images, of course, existed first. It was I who had to set out to find the same places and make the according pictures. But this is roughly like the same process we go through in science. By looking at the evidence of the past, we can make predictions into the future. Using this method, we can, for example, reenact or predict the movements of the continents over hundreds of millions of years. And just like in science, my deductions weren't always perfect. For instance, if you contrast these pictures of the old guard tower, you'll find that the modern image is taken from a different angle. And in the images of the main street and the panorama, the distance in the old photos don't mesh with the angles and distances from which the new photos were shot. So in summary, yes, just because we weren't there doesn't mean we don't or can't ever know what happened in the past. So congratulations, Mr. Hovind, for asking a question in the smug expectation that it can never be answered, or to put it in another way, answer it in a way you don't want to have it answered. I hereby nominate you for the Cock Award, hosted by Potholer54 in 2011. Oh, yeah, and one more thing. Take a look at these fossilized remains of seashells I found on a construction site next to the old house I used to live in. So explain to me, creationists, if you will, why do we find these seashells in the topsoil of the dark Germanic woods of the 21st century? In this case, answering the question is, again, trivial. The reason we find these shells is because, a few 100 million years back, in the Jurassic, Europe used to be a large Caribbean-like environment. And this is also why you get this neat and beautiful landscape like we have here in Tauberfranken, because these fine slopes are exactly what you can expect from the slow erosion pattern on the floor of a large shallow ocean.